Alright, quickly before we start, under 6% of you guys are subscribed, which I understand. I usually forget to subscribe to channels pretty often. But if you guys could sub, like, and drop a comment, whether that's something positive or some feedback, it does help a ton. But with that out of the way, let's get into the video. Alright, what's up guys? In this video, I'm going to be going over essentially every Tarkov medication, and whether I think they're worth it or not, and if I would bring it into raid. I'm going to be going group by group. We got our painkillers, our injury treatment, and then we got like our actual meds. Along with our surgery, and I'm just gonna break them up into different groups and go over them like that. All right, starting off with the painkiller, it's gonna be 4 uses with a 3-second use time, removes 17 hydration, and kills pain for 80 seconds. So I do not think this is worth it. This overall sounds great, and it is fine if you find it in raid or whatever, or if you're new, if you're like starting the game out, it's completely fine to use. But compared to Vaseline and Golden Star, this doesn't really stand a chance, and that's why I prefer to take those over this one. Okay, next up is we have the other 2 painkillers, which is the Augmentin and the ibuprofen. So I'm putting these together because, as you can see, they look very similar. But they're really, like, the ibuprofen is the only one that I would recommend using. So the Augmentin is super good, and you can see all of its stats. But it only has 1 use, and it's not great. Compared to something like the ibuprofen, which costs a little bit at 60k, but it has 15 uses, and it removes pain for 280 seconds, which is far better than like the original painkillers we looked at. So definitely I would recommend using ibuprofen if you can't get your hands on, like a Golden Star or whatever. So it's between this or Vaseline. It's all about personal preference once again. And the Augmentin is just not great. It comes in at a much cheaper price, but it's not worth it, and it's mostly used in crafts. It's not a great item, and I would just recommend using the ibuprofen. Okay, the aforementioned Vaseline here. It is going to be a 6 out of 6 use and a 6-second use time. It's going to remove 5 energy and 5 hydration, but it's going to give you a use time of 300 seconds compared to the 80 seconds the painkiller gives. This is way more worth it. Yeah, it removes pain for 300 seconds, which can last you a solid portion of the raid, especially if you use it like after a fight, or if you're going into a fight. You should have pain killed for the entire fight at the very least. So I think this is definitely worth it, especially if you're new. It's overall not super expensive, coming in at around 40k, but I would say it's worth it, and definitely bring it into raid. Okay, and last up on the painkiller is the Golden Star. If you have a lot of money, use this. There's no reason not to. Essentially, it has 10 out of 10 uses, and it has a use time of 7 seconds, which is a little bit longer than the other 2. But it does remove 15 energy, but it removes contusion, and it has a removes pain duration of 350 seconds, almost a minute longer than the Vaseline, and it removes radiation exposure along with energy and hydration recovery. Overall, it's super solid, but it does come in at a much higher price at around 150k. So if you're rich and you have a lot of money, there's no reason not to use this. But if you're just starting the game out, or if you're on a tighter budget, the Vaseline should do you just fine. Okay, next up is going to be the surgery kits, and we're going to be starting off with the CMS kit. So I think this and the Serve 12 kit, and actually I'm going to bring it down just because they're too similar not to. I think both these are worth it, and they both provide different things. So this has a use time of 16 seconds, and this has a use time of 20 seconds. So off the bat, the CMS kit looks like it's stronger, but this does leave you leave the body part that you're applying surgery to with more HP, allowing it to be healed to a higher overall HP. Along with that, it removes a fracture. But and in the other hand, the CMS kit, it does only takes 2 slots. So it's really a personal decision on this one. If you're tossing it in something like your Gamma, or if you have like an Alpha container, obviously you got to figure out, do you have room for the Serve 12? Do you want to take up that much space, or like do you plan on carrying anything else in there? So it really is personal preference, and I wish I could tell you which one's better, but they're both pretty equal in my opinion for the pros and cons that they both have. I generally run the CMS kit, so take that as you will, but I think both these are very strong choices, and it's totally personal preference. Okay, now on to the 2 bandages that only stop light bleeding. Now there are other medications that stop both light and heavy, but these 2 are the only ones that just stop light bleeding. And as you can see, they're fairly similar. So the bandage does only have 1 use, right? Versus so I'm going to call it the army bandage, and then I'll just say the normal bandage. The armor bandage does have 2 uses, so that is definitely a pro. Compared to this bandage, so in almost every respect, the army bandage is going to be a lot better. If you're on a tight budget, it's not crazy expensive. It's only 2K compared to the other bandages. 1.9K. Honestly, that doesn't really matter. I would definitely recommend the armor bandage over the normal bandage. Past the very early game, you rarely see this. Yeah, so I would just go for the army bandage, if you're going to be using it. But in reality, you don't really need to use either of these. If you can bring something like a Salewa, a Grizzly, an Ifak. All of those, in my opinion, are way more worth it than these two. Okay, so now we got the 3 medications that only stop heavy bleeding. Once again, similar to the bandages, there are other ones that stop both light and heavy and a few other things, but these are the ones that only stop the heavy bleeding. So we have the tourniquet, the hemostat, and the hemostat tourniquet, CAT for the cat. So all of these have different pros and cons. Now, obviously, starting with the Asmarach, right? It does only have 1 use. So it takes 5 seconds to use, as you see, and it stops heavy bleeding, but it only has 1 use. Once you use this, it's gone out of your inventory. It's a great thing to have to pick up. It's super cheap on the flea market, so you can grab a bunch of them and toss them in. You don't even have to keep them in your gamma. But yeah, once you use them, they're gone. The hemostat, once again, has a 3-second use time, but it does have 3 HP. It says here, which means 3 uses. So you can inject the hemostat 3 different times to stop 3 different heavy bleeds at the same time, like in concession, or at different times, or in different raids. It doesn't matter. It has 3 uses, and in my opinion, it's going to be the best one out of all these. Okay, last one is going to be the CAT, the cat, which is similar to the Asmarach. It's going to have a 3-second use time with only 1 use, and it's going to stop heavy bleeding. This is also fairly cheap, only coming at 2K. All these are pretty cheap that we've seen so far. But like I've already said, the hemostat, in my opinion, is definitely the only one you want to be using out of all of these. If you're bringing one into raid, toss this. It can just be in your pockets, and then toss it to like a slot on your hotbar, and just pop it whenever you see that the heavy bleed come in the corner. Definitely worth it in my opinion, and I would recommend using this in all your raids. Okay, next up is going to be the 2 splints. So we have the alu splint, or the immobilizing splint, or we just have the normal splint. Well, I guess they're called immobilizing splints. So we got the alu splint, which is the orange one with 5 uses, and the normal splint, which just has 1 use. So as you can see, they're pretty similar. They both remove a fracture, which is something you obtain from either getting shot at, or if you fall off a building and snap your legs. These are great to have. But if you fall off a building and snap your legs, you have 2 legs, and if you take this one, you only have 1 splint. That's why I, in almost every case, would recommend the alu splint. It's 5 uses, so you can heal up to 5 body parts with it, and I think it's way worth it, and I would definitely recommend taking it into raid. It's not super expensive, only coming in at around 15K. This normal splint is pretty cheap, but yeah, I would definitely recommend taking the alu splint. Spend a little bit more. Just toss this in your gamma if you have to, just so you don't lose it, and just heal any wounds you come across. Definitely worth it to have, and it saves your life more than you can imagine. Okay, last up is going to be all of our medications, the things that heal the body. Like if you have 15 out of 60 on a body limb, it could heal that up to 60 out of 60. So we're going to go by these one by one. All right, starting with the AI2, don't bring this into raid, okay? It has 100 HP, which means it can heal you for 100 HP, obviously. With a 2-second use time, it looks kind of fine. And if you're starting out, and because I think it gives it to you in on the base edition or whatever, bring these into raid. That's completely fine. It'll save you a lot. But once you get some money, there are so many other options, which we're gonna get into in a sec, that just outweigh the benefits of this so much. This becomes essentially obsolete unless you're on a scav run or something, which if you find it, it's fine to use, of course, but I just wouldn't recommend bringing it into raid. All right, next up is going to be the car first aid kit. So what this thing does is it has 220 HP, which means it can heal you, similar to the AI2 we just talked about, but it also stops light bleeding. So once again, it's going to be similar. I wouldn't recommend this, okay? There are other options like the AFAK, the IFAK, the Grizzly, the Salewa, that can do essentially the same thing, that have either better value per slot, or they just they can stop light bleeding, fractures, and they just have an overall more well-rounded first aid kit than this one. And it's fine to use if you have it, again, but it's, especially for the cost, which isn't too high, but 5K, okay, yeah, like 5 to 10K for a solid one. It's just not worth it in my opinion. There are other options out there. I just wouldn't recommend taking this one in. Okay, now we're going to be getting into the ones that I think are actually worth it, starting with the Ifak and the Afak. So they have very similar names, but how similar are they actually when you use them? So the Afak, as I think most people can see, apologize, has over 100 more HP, which it can heal you for. The use time is similar. It stops light bleeding and it stops heavy bleeding. But if you see this can stop 2 heavy bleeds, while the Ifak can only stop 1. So in that case, this one is overall pretty solid. And I like it more. With that said, the Ifak is only going to run you about 11K, while the Afak can run you 15K, which 15 into 20K isn't a crazy difference, but if you're starting out, it could be something to think of. But yeah, for a one-slot item, I think the Afak, and I think the Ifak is really good as well. Afak and Ifak, both very solid choices for one slot. Afak is slightly better, but it all depends. Like, you could get more HP for your heavy bleeds, but it really all depends how you play and how many heavy bleeds you need, and just your overall space management. I think both are great options, and I would recommend taking both in the raid. All right, second and last is going to be the Salewa, however you call it. This is what we are working with. So you see a lot of people using this, and for good reason. So it has 400 HP, which is the same as the Afak, but it has a 45 HP light bleed stop, and it stops heavy bleed for 175. So it can stop quite a few heavy bleeds and light bleeds. It has 2 slots, and it can heal you even if you're not bleeding. Similar to the Ifak and Afak. I don't know if I made that clear. Those can both heal you, similar to the AI2. In case you didn't know. But I think the Salewa also a great choice to bring into raid, and I would definitely recommend it. So all Afak, Ifak, Salewa, and the Grizzly, which I'm going to talk about next, all great options to bring into raid, and they'll save you. Similar to what I said before, if you toss this into a rig, and then you bind it to a slot. I can't do it here because I don't have a rig on me. And like bind it to like your 4 key, and just tap it whenever you'll lose blood, start heavy bleeding, whatever. Just tap it and it'll heal you. Great option to have. I would definitely recommend it. Last up is the Grizzly. So as you heard me say it when I was going over the Salewa, the Grizzly is worth it. It basically does everything you need in a first aid kit. So it has first of all 1800 HP, which is very good. It has about 450 HP per slot. So with a total of 1800, it's going to be stronger than all the other ones we've looked at. Not to mention everything it does. So it has a 5-second use time, which is not that long. It can stop light bleeding. It can stop heavy bleeding. It can remove a fracture, removes a contusion, and removes radiation exposure. So essentially, everything we've looked at up here, besides the surgery kits, and the painkillers, but basically everything else, all of this can be done with just the Grizzly. It does take 4 slots though, which can be troublesome for some people. You can either toss it in a gamma or epsilon, whichever container you have, even an alpha actually. Or what I like to do is I like to bring like a BlackRock rig and toss this into the 4 slot area. You will die with it sometimes, but for everything it does, it's only, it's pretty cheap. 30K usually for a good one, 30 to 40K. That is not that much. 50K for everything this does is something that I would be happy to pay. So I would definitely recommend bringing this into raid if you have money. Now, if you're on a tight budget, I wouldn't spend the money on this because there's a chance you might lose it if you don't put it in your secure container. And there's other options, bring an Ifak or something, and then bring like a Splints. If you have money, bring this. There's no reason not to, and it's overall a very solid medical item. Okay, that is basically gonna wrap it up. I hope this video helped. So, like I said, I didn't go over any of like the injectors, the morphine, the Propatel, the SJ6, any of those, because I would honestly be happy to make a second video on it, but just let me know. I just wanted to keep this video pretty simple. But yeah, I just gave my thoughts on what I think are some solid medical items and which ones I like to bring into raid. So especially for like the newer players, I hope this helps you guys out. And if it did, leaving a like and subscribing helps a ton. But yeah, that's basically going to be it. And thank you guys for watching.